What is up guys, welcome back to another GeekaWhat video, and today I've got something a little bit different for you. A super powerful $1,500-ish gaming PC build that's focused on super silent operation. This thing is literally whisper quiet. So let's take a look at the parts I selected for this build, and then we'll jump into some live gaming benchmarks to see just how well it performs. Now this system for me slots perfectly between the sort of $1,500 and $1,800 price points, depending on just how you spec it out, but more on that later, hold your horses. I will of course link all the components mentioned in the description below for different regions and retailers if you'd like to check them out, but you get the gist. Now one thing that makes this system special and sets it apart is just how quiet it is, as I mentioned in the introduction, and the first component that we can thank for that is actually the case. The Cooler Master SL600M is a brand spanking new case from the guys at, you guessed it, Cooler Master, that rethinks the way that airflow is done. Rather than fresh air coming in from the front and exhausting at the rear and the top, the air comes in at the bottom and exhausts from the top of the chassis, tying in with the philosophy or the scientific basis, that heat does indeed rise. This chimney design, as it's being called, alongside those large 200mm fans, allows you to push a load of fresh air through your system whilst it's staying really nice and quiet. Quietness and airflow though aren't the only two perks of this case. You also get an I/O shield that lights up when you wave your hand across the front, which just excites the 9-year-old in me by ridiculous amounts, and also is pretty useful in the dark, alongside support for plenty of 3.5-inch and 2.5-inch drives, a front mounted power supply, support for full-size ATX motherboards, and a shed load of cable management room. It's a really unique chassis that definitely is on the heavier, larger and slightly more expensive side, but nevertheless very cool. Talking of stuff that is very cool, for the CPU cooler I opted for the Deepcool.
That is just way too many puns.
The Deepcool Captain 360EX in white. Now this CPU cooler is actually the perfect choice for today's build. Not only is that large radiator keeping temperatures and noise levels crucially as low as possible, but it's also aesthetically pretty unique. Further to that point, it's super duper cheap at around $104, though prices are subject to change, and even includes 2 RGB strips with the cooler itself. What other $100 CPU cooler gives you all these features from the likes of Corsair or Cooler Master, for example? We're going to be mounting this CPU cooler onto the Intel Core i5 9600K CPU. The more and more I've used this chip over the last few months, and the more and more I've fallen in love with it, the super fast single threaded performance makes a real difference in even the latest AAA titles optimized to use loads of cores, with a base clock speed of 3.7 and a boost of 4.6 GHz. Not only does it have single-threaded performance covered, but the 6 cores and 12 threads mean multi-threaded tasks are not a pain for this chip either, and it provides some really good productivity numbers for video editing or streaming alongside stellar gaming numbers. You can of course bump this CPU up to the i7 or even the i9 if you like, without changing any of the other components in today's build. Talking of the other components in today's build, isn't this video just full of smooth segues? For the motherboard, I selected the ASUS Prime Z390-A. One of the cheaper motherboards on the Intel Z390 chipset, which of course facilitates more PCIe lanes, better expansion options, and overclocking support. This board has really impressed me. It's got a unique aesthetic as well, with white and silver as the accent colours to the nice black and thankfully not brown PCB that you'll find on cheaper models. Motherboards is definitely an area where AMD has a bit of an edge, as you get access to a wider feature set on the cheaper boards, but as far as Intel goes, for Z390 without spending a whole load of cash, this is the board to opt for. Moving on to the memory in today's build before I forget, I think I'll leave. I selected a 3200MHz kit of the ADATA Spectrix D41. Now if you wanted to make this build just a little bit less blinky, you could opt for a non-RGB RAM kit, but frankly, I don't see why you'd want to. This D41 kit from ADATA looks fantastic, with 16GB of capacity being optimal for gaming in 2019. If you wanted to give this build a bit more of a productivity advantage, a 32GB kit is also a good choice, though this does leave the door open for easy upgrade paths later on down the line. This particular kit has a grey heat spreader, which I really like, and prefer to the red heat spreader options from the likes of ADATA as well. Moving on to the storage in today's build, and this is the bit of every video where I always give a massive disclaimer. This is the most sort of personal, sort of customizable part there is, and really depends on just what you're after. My recommendation though for this system would be a fast 500GB NVMe SSD drive for your Windows and your boot up and your key files and applications, in particular the ADATA SX8200 Pro, as it's one of the more affordable drives on the market. Though stuff from the likes of Samsung with their 970 EVO Plus is also a really good choice. And I would couple that with a bit of mass storage, in particular a 2TB drive from Seagate, their Barracuda model, will do the job nicely. Nowhere near as fast as your SSD, but it isn't designed to be, and is going to be storing your large Steam and Origin libraries. If you know you've got a few more files to store than the next guy, bump that up to a 3 or 4TB unit, and it's going to cause you no problems whatsoever. Moving on to the graphics card in today's build, the component many of you will have been waiting for, I opted for the Nvidia Founders Edition RTX 2080 for a couple of reasons. Now Nvidia have actually started selling their own Founders Editions of the graphics cards independently on their own website, and this has been a real game changer in my opinion. Often priced far lower than options from add-in board partners such as ASUS, GeekaWhat and MSI, they're a really appealing and attractive option. The RTX 2080 is a great card for 4K gaming, and of course has the horsepower to properly support Nvidia's ray tracing and DLSS technology, which hopefully should become a bit more prevalent in the latest AAA titles as they start to release. Ray tracing aside though, this card's got plenty of power, and the CUDA acceleration is also going to work really nicely for productivity applications such as Adobe's Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve. The card is poised nicely for 1440p and more importantly 4K gaming, though I'll cover more of that in the gaming benchmarks portion of today's video. Now, is it just me, or I'll pop a poll in the card section here, but how good does this sort of reference design cooler look? I must admit, it's probably one of my favourite looking GPUs to date. Moving on to the final component for today's build, I can't quite believe we're practically finished already. I selected the Cooler Master V750. Now, as pointed out by my good YouTube friends, the Toasty Bros over on Twitter, go and check them out, power supply pricing's actually been a bit crazy over the past few weeks, few months now. All in all, if you can pick up something for this particular build with around 750 watts of output, preferably a semi or fully modular interface with an 80 plus bronze, silver or once again preferably gold rating from a reputable manufacturer, you're going to be just fine. I can personally attest to this particular Cooler Master unit being really quite fantastic, with a fully modular interface, meaning you only plug in the cables you need, nice black rubber sleeved cables, and an 80 plus gold certification, meaning it's super duper efficient and is going to waste as little power as is possible. As always though, keep an eye on pricing, and I will link all the parts both in the description below and in the card section here now, where you can compare pricing and all that good stuff. But with that being said, now seems like a good time to jump into some gaming benchmarks and see just how well this system performs. But first, if you haven't already liked today's video, give it a big old like rating, it helps me out so much, and subscribe if you want to see more content from me. But roll the gaming benchmarks. as you saw from those gaming performance figures, this system has got plenty of power under the hood, despite being so quiet in its operation. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a big old like rating. All the parts mentioned will be in the description below. Subscribe, follow me on Instagram and Twitter for an exclusive behind the scenes look. But as always, enjoy the snazzy outro montage and we'll see you in the next GeekaWhat video.